I've taken a pretty strong stance against focus groups. And this has generated some feedback from people, especially who work in market research, who say, hey, I've used focus groups and they've been successful. And I'll say, that's great, because I would love for people to prove me wrong. Because what I want everybody to do is conduct effective research and make better products and have better, stronger businesses. Like, that's my goal. My goal isn't just to say focus groups are terrible. But in general, focus groups are terrible because they're often conflated with research. When people think of qualitative research or ethnographic research, their mind immediately goes to a room with a two-way mirror and some M&Ms and a leader asking people how they feel about Pepsi or something like that. But focus groups teach you nothing about how people behave in the real world, because that's where your product or service has to succeed. Out there with one person in front of a computer or in front of a kiosk or in front of a rack of products and making that decision to do something that helps your business. They're not going to be sitting around a conference table in an unfamiliar office talking to people saying, oh, hey, what's the best option here? Focus groups are a study in the group dynamic. That's what's going on there. And what people say often has a performative aspect, and it goes back to ego and insecurity and all of those things that really affect design and business decisions. Anything somebody, a participant, says in a focus group, they're saying because they know that other people in the group are listening, that the moderator is listening, and that there are probably people on the other side of that glass. So they're going to say something that makes them seem smarter or makes them seem nicer. It's like the movies that people put in their Netflix queue. You know, you put the foreign films, you put the the dramas that you think you should watch, you put the documentaries about the environment, and then you rent the stupid comedies. You actually rent the stupid comedies. But if you ask somebody like, oh, what movie do you want to watch next in front of strangers that they want to impress, they'll probably say, oh, I'm really interested in Croatian documentaries about pollution. And those are the kind of answers you'll get. And that's why I'm so against focus groups, because even the New York Times, when they write about research, they talk about it in terms of like doing focus groups. And I'm taking this strong stand because I want to clarify the issues for people, to get people to really think about what they say when they're talking about focus groups. Focus groups were originally developed by a very brilliant American sociologist named Robert K. Merton years ago. And even he came to criticize how they were being used, because as he put it, they're a means to uncovering questions and themes to pursue in research. They are not themselves research. So if you get a group of people together talking about how they take photos or share photos at Thanksgiving or something like that, you won't get data from that, but you might get, oh, somebody said something interesting, so let's do some research around how they and their families looked at photos together after Thanksgiving dinner. But nothing that people say in a focus group I would take as representative of real world behavior. People will say that they have different attitudes, but attitudes and behavior aren't a straightforward match like that. Because we work with a wide variety of organizations, the clients who come to us have the full range of experience with and attitudes towards research as a part of the design process. And sometimes they do really think like, oh, we're hiring you because you're the people who will draw pictures for us. And if that's what they're hiring us to do, they're way overpaying, because we solve business problems for people. And so it's up to us, and this is something we've become at Mule very familiar and experienced and comfortable with, is drawing the line back from, you're hiring us because you want this outcome, and this outcome might be more customers, this outcome might be more respect in the industry, the outcome might be a more robust feature set that allows your customers to do this set of things that somehow makes you more money. And once we've established that what they're hiring us to do is really important to their business, then it's pretty straightforward to walk back to, well, we need to find out if what you're saying about who your customers are, why they're coming to you, why they might choose some other solution over yours. We have to make sure all of that is true. So these days it's a lot more likely that a client would come to us and say, oh, we've already done all that homework. We hired a market research consulting group, or we did some internal surveys, and we just have to make it very clear that all of that is an input to our process. And we'll take it, and we'll take as much as we can, but we have to understand the problem for ourselves. We have to ask our own questions to do the work that we've been hired to do. And as a part of that, we have to share that with our client. It's not just that we understand the problem. A key output of our research process is a shared understanding. And that's one of the reasons why I advocate a really collaborative research process. Some researchers, especially people who come out of a more academic background that's more competitive among researchers, researchers themselves are competing to be published or to be associated with a particular type of research or to have that expertise. And that doesn't help the things I'm talking about either, because we want everybody on our team to participate. And I want people to start thinking of research as a collaborative activity that the whole design and development team can do together and participate in, so that everybody has that same understanding. Because anybody who's making a decision about the design, whether it's a manager, whether it's a developer, whether it's an interface designer, needs to be working from the same set of information and the same set of priorities and decisions. The designer founder is another one of those trendy buzzwords we've been hearing a lot lately. I think it's not, the degree to which, what design means to the kind of business you're trying to start and the skills that you need on your founding team are very individual to the kind of company you're starting. So again, it's the same thing. It's like, lean UX or one of those buzzwords where people want that silver bullet, that magic answer of like, oh, if I just do things in this way, then my startup will be successful. And I think that points out how much of a roulette table the startup scene is these days. It's like, oh, I need a designer to blow on my dice. I realize there's no dice in roulette. But what I'm advocating for is having a lot of clarity about what you as a founder, an entrepreneur, or investor are trying to accomplish, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and what you need to accomplish that. And that's going to vary. The kind of design you need, what design means to you as a business is very, very different depending on what you're trying to do. I think you can conceptualize starting a business as part of the design process. Like, you are designing your business. All design is, again, is solving a problem according to a particular plan, based in certain information. And so when you talk about design, if you're talking about like, oh, when should I have a logo, or when should I have an interface, that really, again, depends on what you need to have happen in the world. And so it's like design is just a part of that. And I try to really encourage people not to split out design as something special. There was a phrase that was going around in the business press a few years ago, the ROI of design, as though design is something different you invest in, like building a factory. I don't know. But design isn't separate. And I think that's the most important change I'd like to see, is you don't think about design as a totally separate function. It would be like, oh, what's the ROI of bookkeeping? When should my business have bookkeeping? It's like from the beginning. It's like, when should my business have design? Well, from the beginning. But what shape that takes is you should think of in terms of, well, what problem are you trying to solve? What skills do you need to solve that problem? And that's all a design process. What good design is, again, is very context dependent. And that's something I harp on again and again. Everything's very context dependent. I look for inspiration not to necessarily the solutions that people have already created, but I look at the problems that are out there to solve. Again, I look for people who've chosen the most interesting problems to solve with the widest reaching implications. Because a lot of times when people think about design, good design or design inspiration, they're thinking about something that's aesthetically pleasing, something that's pretty, something that's well laid out. And that can be very important. But the kind of design I find inspiring is the design of a complex system. A design that really reflects the way the real world works and improves it. A design that I really admire is the design of the Zipcar car sharing service, which has a web component, it has a customer service component, it has this humans all have to share cars and kind of interact with each other, and there's a whole set of rules. And that whole system design has really changed things for people. Like, there are people who don't need to own cars anymore in urban environments. And I think that's a very interesting and successful design because there's so many things it touches. Genius design is a phrase that some people use to describe design without reference to research or to the user. It's essentially the designer sitting down, or the group of designers sitting down and coming up with a solution to a problem based on their own expertise and based on their own knowledge. And I think the fallacy of genius design is that anybody who is capable of sitting down and coming up with a really excellent solution to a problem or really excellent new product is probably the beneficiary of their own expertise, which is accumulated research over years. Like if I were to sit down and design something that's the solution to a problem that I've encountered many, many times before, I've already done the research. In many cases, the research might be banked. And so I'd say, well, maybe I could do that. But I wouldn't say that it wasn't research-based design. I'd say that, well, it's based on knowledge that I already accumulated. Research is just accumulating that knowledge. And if it's knowledge you already have, that counts too. It's just you can't sit down and say, okay, with no knowledge, tabula rasa, just through my own magical unicorn powers, I'm going to come up with something that really meets the needs of the real world. That would involve being psychic. A company that does research really well is Apple, of course. Unfortunately, because of a comment Steve Jobs made 10 or 15 years ago about focus groups and how you can't focus group your way to a good product, there's a myth that Steve Jobs didn't believe in research and that Apple doesn't do research. But Apple is an incredibly controlled and secretive organization, and they're very strategic about their communications. And so they have this aura of genius design. We just think of these things. But if you go back to, Steve Jobs in his early career, he talks about the importance of knowing the customer and understanding the competitors and all of these things. And when you look at their products, it's very obvious that they're interested in how these products fit into people's lives and how these products make people feel. And even their marketing messages are really incredibly effective because, they hit people in a very emotional place as well as a very practical place and seem to reflect the priorities and interests and desires of real people. And so that's they do a tremendous amount of research that you never hear about because that's really all of their trade secrets.